so we're going to talk about that first step, identifying the desired results. What I'd like for you to do is to take just a moment and thinking about the course mapping process. What are the most important knowledge and skills for your course? In this scenario, imagine 2 years from now, one of your students walks up to you, that they see you out and about and say, oh, I remember your class, I learned X. What do you want X to be? What's that one thing, that enduring idea that they that you hope that they held on to? Could be ideas, attitudes, beliefs, knowledge, skills. Take a moment to think about that. And I'd like for everybody to type what that thing or things are in the chat box for the course that you have in mind.
Let us know if you need some assistance finding where the chat is.
Great. Does anyone have one they'd like to share with us and we can talk about for just a moment?
Dawn shared one.
So Dawn, I'm going to pick on you since you were first. Can you share with us what class you teach and explain that enduring understanding for us? Let's see. We can't hear you right now, so your mic is probably muted. I can unmute it for you. There you go.
Okay, I was typing. I currently teach apparel production courses, but I'm hoping I'm getting some additional training. I've already started to develop a functional apparel course, and I'm going to go to like a workshop. So I'm hoping to eventually teach, like since you were saying 2 years from now, teach like a functional apparel course. So which would involve a specific problem, being able for them to actually do some research about that particular area, whether or not it was occupational, sport, medical, whatever, and then be able to learn how to fix that problem and produce the apparel to meet whatever their needs are. Does that kind of help?
In 2 years, you hope a student walks up to you and say, I remember taking your class. I figured out how to fix this particular problem by using the strategies that you taught me in this class with this fabric.
Exactly. Yes. that would be wonderful.
I'm doing that now in my job, and I learned how to do that.
Yes.
Got it. So let's talk about what X could potentially be, that enduring understanding. Dawn, I'm going to go ahead and mute you again.
Yeah.
Ways to identify what those enduring understandings might be for you include the newly formed discipline of threshold concepts, which argues that in every discipline there are threshold concepts, not core concepts, but big ideas that once a learner apprehends them, it opens whole new vistas of the discipline for them. And as teachers, you have some familiarity with those sort of key moments or key concepts that help students gain access to lot more information about it. So I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but one way that threshold concepts helps you identify those big ideas or enduring understandings is it asks you to identify the struggle points or the sticking points in any given course for your students. If in our longer course redesign in the summer, the application asks participants to identify what those sticking points might be for their students. The trouble with us as expert learners in our discipline is that we're so far removed from a novice orientation. You know, we've known it for so long, it becomes second nature. So it's a bit of a decoding the disciplines process that we must undertake to find out what those X, Y, Z concepts are.
Right. So, and she used the term big ideas in her discussion of those threshold concepts. And that could include things that are core to the discipline and revisited over and over again over time, or engaging in inquiry through questioning, connecting, sourcing, making inferences, alternate perspectives, and so on. Another thing that you might want to consider including at the beginning when you're getting started are prerequisite and subsequent courses. Consider courses your students have already taken before they come to your course. Are there stated prerequisites? Are there a set of knowledge and skills that you assume they'll already have in place? Is there some knowledge or skills that you think they may need to revisit? So those pain points that Diane referred to earlier. You might also want to think about the post-requisite courses that require your course as a prereq. What knowledge and skills do they need to be leaving your course with? Those are also ideas that you can use to get started planning your course map. You may also consider what standards that you might need to include. These might be, if you're teaching a general core course, there are some general core student learning outcomes that you can include. There may be some programmatic level outcomes if you're teaching upper level undergrad courses or graduate level courses. Are there any external requirements such as accreditation or licensure? Should these kinds of things be included in your course? What are the implications that those, kinds of requirements have on the content that you present? Are there competencies? Are there particular skills that must be demonstrated to a level of mastery in your course? So all of these are things that you could think about in terms of that X factor that you want students to retain over time. From there, once you have an idea of what those things are, you want to begin to write your learning objectives or learning outcomes. And oftentimes in education, you will hear those terms used interchangeably. They are similar, but there's some nuances between the two. And what we're doing is actually creating something that we can measure, creating a statement of knowledge and skills that we can identify and measure in the course. So an objective is actually a forward-looking statement. It's an expectation of the intended results of your instruction. It's what you hope to accomplish. It's your target that you're aiming for. While your outcomes is the actual level of attainment. It's after instruction has taken place, and it's a demonstration of the student's actual learning. So it's whether or not they met that target. And we also provided a link here at the bottom for the Auburn core curriculum. If you teach one of those classes, you can actually see which courses are aligned to which of those SLOs, and you can include those in your courses as well. All right, there are many types of objectives. Remember these written statements of observable, measurable learning that fall into a couple of different learning domains. You have your cognitive objectives, which is knowing and understanding. And that's also at different levels. It's comprehension. It's, can I apply that knowing? Do I not just know it, but can I apply it? Can I synthesize the information that I've learned from various places and various sources and put it together and make connections between them? There's psychomotor objectives, which are basically the learning that takes place in a performance way. I'm able to do something. And then there's affective. That's a change in attitude, in behavior, in their feelings about a topic. In this chart that we're showing here on the screen, it breaks it down even farther into things like informational learning, applied skills, conceptual, domain level modeling, and innovations. And there's several others throughout here. What I'd like for you to do is to take a moment and type in the chat box, what is important in your course in terms of the type of learning and the type of objectives that you would have for the students in your course. Which of these objectives is important in your course? And share those in the chat box.
Share.
So looking at the table to the right, if you can share in the chat box, which of these types of objectives are most important in the course that you're thinking about?
I'm going to make a promise.
So if you see my example, I alluded to a course I taught previously, Instructional Technology for Educators. For me, it was really, really important that students be able to synthesize lots of different resources of technology tools and applications and resources that were available to them, synthesize them, design lessons that utilize those effectively, and really innovate, be creative in how they utilize those tools and resources in ways that engage the 21st century learner. So to me, those were the most important kinds of objectives that needed to take place in my class. So then from there, once you figured out the type of objective that you were going to be writing for your class, then you could actually write it out in a written statement. Knowing what kind of objective you have creates insight into the kind of assessments that you'll need later on. So it's really important that we get these right. For example, if I chose a psychomotor objective, then the kind of assessment that I'm going to use later on is going to be a performance-based, because I need to see, are they able to do something, right? So there's this congruence between the objectives and the assessment that will make that connection. So when we write our objectives, we have to keep that in mind. And I'm going to introduce you to this method called ABCD. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I just want you to use this as a framework for thinking about the objectives in your course. It's where you think about who is your audience, what is it that you want them to know and be able to do, what conditions are they going to have to be able to demonstrate that knowledge or that skill, and how well, to what degree will they be demonstrating that learning. I'm going to show you an example. This is a cognitive comprehension level objective. Given examples and non-examples of constructivist activities in a college classroom, the undergraduate education student will be able to accurately identify constructivist examples and explain why each example is or isn't a constructive activity in 20 words or less. I actually have two different things that I want them to be able to do, which is identify and explain. So identify examples and explain why they are examples or non-examples. And I'm giving how much a degree of to what it is that I want them to be able to do. Notice that there's two terms, accurately and in 20 words or less. You can use lots of different words to explain that. For example, if I say accurately, that really implies 100% mastery. But if I am satisfied with 80% mastery, I could say 8 out of 10 examples, or 80% proficiency. So you want to give yourself some degree in order to be able to look back and say, did my students achieve what I intended for them to achieve by setting that level of mastery. Does anybody have a objective in mind that you are willing to share with us that we can put into this format if it's not already in that format? Do I have a volunteer that's willing to type an objective into the chat box? If you don't have an objective already in mind, think about your course. Pick one thing from your course, one standard from your course, for example, one topic from your course, one big idea. Oh, yay, there we go. Let's take a moment and look at what Dawn has shared with us. Give everybody a moment to read. All right, anyone in particular, Dawn, that you want to work with today?
What do you mean by work with today?
So we're going to see if we can actually put it in this ABCD format just to practice. You know, you don't always have to write them out this way, but if you think through the framework, it helps to make sure you're meeting all of those elements in your objectives.
Well, this was kind of like from a course class that I took here at Auburn, so that's kind of why I was able to put it up for you guys. So this was a course that I was looking at for the audience. It would probably be a junior to senior level course. Behavior, what?
Let's do the recognize. That I think it's the third one, maybe.
The condition?
So, yeah, recognize various areas of functional design and how they may interact or impact.
Oh, you're looking at mine. Okay. Okay, so let's see, recognize. Okay, so for this, it's functional design is broken up into various areas depending on if it's occupational, industrial, things like that. And so there's kind of like some lectures that go along with that. And so it's for them, I want them to kind of develop some like critical thinking skills to be able to look at the garments, look at who's using the garments, look at what they do, and to be able to kind of figure things out. Like it's kind of more along the lines of the critical thinking skills to be able to assess it. So it kind of 3 kind of goes with 4 about developing critical thinking skills to assess. They kind of go together.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps.
So you could actually combine those thoughts if you wanted to recognize design and think critically about. So recognize design and think critically about solutions, problems and solutions.
Yeah, I mean, because this was written specifically for a course, like from a hypothetical syllabus, let's say. So,
gotcha. So the key to what you're talking about now is those action verbs. So recognizing means at some point they're going to be shown something,
right?
And being able to say this is this kind of design versus another kind of design.
Exactly.
So that kind of guides your thinking when it comes to the assessment later on. When you say recognize, it defaults to some kind of identification activity or assessment.
Okay.
Whereas developing or thinking critically is a little bit more difficult to assess. How do you assess critical thinking unless you provide them with a scenario that they have to think through and provide alternative solutions?
Right. Kind of along what it would be, it would kind of, this is like a project-based class. So they would actually have to like fill out forms showing that they actually like interviewed or reviewed their actions, and then talk about like what the problems were, and then actually provide a solution in the form of an actual like garment. And so I guess the assessment for that is actually looking at all of whether or not they actually did the work. Does that kind of make sense?
It does. Let's see.
If there was a solution that was brought forward so that you could show that they actually applied some critical thinking to the problem and came up with a solution that was testable, I guess.
Okay, so given a project form for a particular type of fabric, perhaps?
Yeah, it's any sort of a problem, whether it can be fabric, it could be the occupation. So, I mean, like fabric would be like a good example. So if someone wanted to look at whether or not there could be a better fabric to help firefighters not, get as hot, or, then there could be testing or something involved with testing a particular fabric with, heat or flame or something like that, Or it could be something more simple as, a sports garment, and whether or not the athlete can actually, move better in it. And you could test that by certain control measures too.
Right.
Motion capture, something along the line.
So potentially you're saying they're given a form for a particular type of project that they're working on, say the football apparel that you're talking about, and they have to recognize the design challenges with that fabric in that particular use.
Correct.
What are the potential problems and what are the solutions for it?
Yes. And actually, hopefully actually apply them to an actual garment so that we could see, so that they can actually see that it has, either gotten better, like did that work or did it not work? And if it didn't work, why didn't it work? And, kind of learn from that.
Right. So you can then build a second objective that is more performance-based and say they're applied their understanding of concepts and produce a product, produce and test a product, right? So that could even be another objective. So again, you're thinking about what is it that you want them to know. So in this case, this is one of those cognitive to knows because they're filling out the form and they're demonstrating their knowledge. Versus now you're talking about a skill objective, a psychomotor objective. What do you want them to do, which is apply that and produce and test a actual garment. Right. Right. And then the final piece of it is the degree. How well do you want them to do that? Accurately, 100% mastery, 80% mastery. What is it that you want in terms of a result?
Yeah.
Sometimes that's dictated by, outside.
It always kind of depends too on like what resources you have, your students. I mean, I have some that perform at, I swear, 95 to 100%, and I have others that are lower. So I try to aim more like for 75, 80% to say that, okay, that you've actually put effort into it, that I see that you've gone through all the motions, you've done all the things that I've asked you to do, and you actually have a product, or something testable and wearable, so I'm normally trying to go for like 75%, 80.
Right.
As an average for my students.
And that would be your minimum expectation for all students. So you would hope that all students would achieve at least that or above. Right. That's your hope, that X factor that we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
Well, Dawn, thank you for sharing with us and letting us work with one of your objectives today.
No problem.
And I hope everybody kind of understood the thinking process that we use, that framework that we used in order to create that objective today. Does anybody have any questions about how the ABCD model works?